I must come to the conclusion, after 22 years, that the current generation of public sector leaders collectively have failed us. Why we have slept in the past 25 years is precisely a function of leadership. In this case, failed public sector leadership. Collectively, our nation's best policymakers, our nation's public sector leaders, and the governance models that they employ brought us to where we are today. Far behind in terms of economic growth relative to our neighbors, and sadly, in chronic political crisis. The President said a few months ago that the reason why we are not progressing is because of political discord. I beg to disagree. The reason why we are not progressing is precisely because of the absence of political leadership with vision, principle, and conviction. How do we get out of the vicious cycle? There must be, in the arena of legislation, political reforms. We have pending legislation on political campaign expenses for political parties. We have pending legislation in terms of strengthening the strengthening the provisions of the Omnibus Election Code on third courtism, or preventing third courtism. But this, of course, is not enough. These are first steps. In a nutshell, we will be able to get out of this vicious cycle if we are able to present a political reform agenda. We deserve better. It cannot be politics as usual. We must reform our politics and our public sector governance. The future, if you ask me at this point, is neither with the administration nor the traditional political opposition. The future is in the hands of, if I may call, a third force that has yet to emerge. We must look for an alternative political force. This is the challenge to political leadership in the coming months. An alternative political force anchored on reforms and genuine change. We must look to political leadership that will focus on new methods, new approaches, new paradigms. We must work towards public sector, private sector partnership for good governance. This is the challenge to citizens, as well as for all those who are tired of politics as usual, or the politics of greed, of corruption, patronage, and convenience. For us to get out of this political stalemate, because if you look at the political situation today, and you look at the players, yung dating nasa administrasyon, napunta sa oposisyon. Yung dating naman nasa oposisyon, naman ngayon sa administrasyon. Para bang palipat-lipat at papalit-palit, ngunit wala namang pinag-uusapang prinsipyo at paninindigan. Ang kinakailangan, lalo na nung nakarang halalan, 2007, where I ran as an independent, rather than go the way of convenience, go the safe way, I decided to stick by what I believed was right, to stand by my principles. I could not go to the administration in 2007, May, because I asked for President Arroyo's resignation after Hello Garci. 2 years later, I would swallow what I said and say, joke only. But in the same vein, I could not go to the opposition. Because in 2001, I was part of EDSA. I had asked for the previous leadership to resign. How can I then, 5 or 6 years later, because I had to win in an election, set that aside and say, tsaka na muna ang paninindigan at prinsipyo, kailangan muna manalo. I could not do that. I could not explain that to my children, and I could not explain that to myself. If I cannot be true to myself, how can I be true to the people I wish to serve? In a sense, I believe, and what happened is that despite the lack of a national political machinery, we were able to make our message heard. And we ended up number 5 as an independent. But the real story there is that I was trying, and this is to share finally before I end, I was trying my darnest best to present an alternative to both the administration and the traditional political opposition. I was trying my darnest best to convince, at that point, Senators Arroyo, Senator Recto, Senator Aquino, Senator Villar, and myself to form a third force, an independent bloc, an alternative to both the administration and the traditional political opposition. It is my premise and my belief that precisely we remain in a political stalemate between the administration and the opposition is because GMA is not weak, the administration is not too weak to fall, but then the traditional political opposition is not too weak to win, is not too strong to win. They have both represent the past. They both do not give us reasons to be optimistic about the future. And that is precisely why we have the political stalemate. The challenge to political leadership is to provide alternatives, is to provide a vehicle within which people can rally, can move forward, can move towards and rally around. And that, I believe, is the challenge today as we see the ZTE-NBN deal, as we see the continuing political crisis, chronic crisis that we confront. It's a function of leadership to provide direction. If I had joined either the opposition or the administration in the last election, I would have been perpetuating that mindset, that it does not matter what you stand for, what matters is that you win. And that is the politics as usual mindset that we must end. And we must end it by action, by purposeful action, by collective, if I may borrow the term, communal action. So the challenge to us, even in the legislature and in politics as a whole, is how do we present a new force, a genuine alternative to politics as usual? How do we present a viable alternative to the current crop that presents itself as choices for our people? This is the challenge. After 22 years of EDSA, we are still in the same rut, if not worse. We have not moved forward. I don't think that the people are Filipinos are so lacking in imagination and creativity that we have failed to solve problems 20 years after. What we lack is leadership with vision, leadership that is willing to walk the talk, leadership that is willing to take risks, leadership that will be bold, that will have conviction and have principle, being supported by an enlightened, vigilant, determined people. These two factors, or these two elements combined, I can see the next generation of public sector leadership in our country in the next 20 years to be truly much better than where we are today. As far as I'm concerned, time is running out and we have a plan. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon.